Welcome to our Sheffield Live TV sporting chat. We've got plenty of people on the show this week. It's a very busy virtual studio, and there are going to be plenty of people packing the virtual sofa this week. In part one, it's my great pleasure to introduce two guys of, varying eras, shall we say. One of them is more contemporary, and I'm sure most of our viewers will know of Brian Howard, the former Barnsley and Sheffield United, and many others, football player, midfield player. I'm not being rude when I suggest that some members of our audience may not be so familiar with our other guest, but I am very familiar with him because he played for Sheffield Wednesday right at the very start of my career, and he had an extremely distinguished career for several clubs. Was capped 40 times by Wales. I'm referring to Peter Rodrigues. Hello, Peter.
Hi, Alan. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And Brian as well. Hello to you.
Hi, Alan.
And you're both in the Southampton area. You've got that strand in common, even though you're many, many years apart. Brian these days is a football agent for his sins. Well, not entirely for his sins, but we'll come to that in a little while. Meantime, Peter, if I can kick off with you, I'm so delighted to see that you've still got the tash.
Yes, it's always been, and I think I started growing it at Wednesday. I think that was the time when it started to come on, which went down a little bit further in those days, plus the sideboards at the bottom and a little bit more hair, but it all started at Sheffield, believe it.
Well, it's become a trademark, and of course also explains your nickname, I think.
Yeah, I moved down to Southampton eventually after leaving Wednesday, and a lad called Jerry O'Brien just looked up and he just went, "Hey, Pedro," with the tash and the sideboards and what have you, and the name is stuck, which I quite enjoy now. It's a nice intro.
I did, when we spoke on the phone before this, I did suggest that you got my permission to blacken it in if you wanted, but you very nobly refused.
Only because in '76, when we went to the cup final with Southampton, the lads were opening various shops and doing things to sort of gain a little bit of players' pool money. And they looked at me, and the hair was a lot grayer then. And they said, "Oh, Grecian 2000, it's an advert on the TV." I said, "No, I'm sorry, but what you see is what you get, and there's no way I'm going to change it."
Right, well, good on you. And of course, FA Cup winning, Peter Rodrigues, the one and only time Southampton have won the Cup in their history. Peter led that triumph back in 1976. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but also specifically your time at Sheffield Wednesday, which was not so distinguished in terms of the way the team did. There's a book out, as you well know, called, well, I've got it here actually, it's called Our Lowest Ebb. And Peter was with Sheffield Wednesday in the 70s, 70 to 75, and they hit rock bottom around that time. Nothing to do with Peter, you understand. We will reflect on those times a little bit later as we go on. Brian, though, good to speak to you. I know that during the lockdown, you've kept very busy and for a very good reason as well.
Yeah, it's been busy because obviously the situations with contracts and, you know, like I said, teams in League One and League Two, a lot of players are being furloughed. And then in the Championship and Premier League, a lot of people are making wage deferrals and wage contributions to the NHS. So just dealing with everyone's individual contracts at different clubs to make sure that the players are protected, that they are deferring their money, they are giving up some money to help protect the futures of their football clubs and their livelihoods. But, you know, they've signed their contracts and, yeah, they're due their money, and just make sure that, you know, when football does get back up and running, hopefully sooner rather than later, you know, everything gets back to some sort of normality and they get their contracts back.
Yeah, but personally, you've remained active, and I refer to something called the Saints Foundation. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I don't know if Peter knows much about this.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So obviously, it's brilliant that all the guys are on there, and we play a lot of charity games most of the time. And, you know, I think David Peach played in the game last year with us, one of his teammates from the cup final, and then through the generations, through Glenn Cockrell and down and into Matt Letizier's, James Beattie's, and then I'm one of the youngest ones. And we're trying to give back a bit of our time at the moment, and we go down to the Fair Share warehouse. Everyone has a different shift every week, and we're putting food parcels together for the vulnerable and make sure everyone's kept in food at these difficult times.
Yeah, well, that's excellent to hear. And do you know the image of footballers constantly gets a bashing, but when you hear about things like that, it does put into perspective that some of the criticism is well wide of the mark. Can bring you in on that, Peter. I dare say even in your day, footballers' reputation wasn't as high as it could have been. But things like this make you think or rethink.
Yeah, I mean, it was high in our day because we were the local heroes of the town, basically. But now it's a different ball game. And what these guys do, I've mentioned Ronaldo, for example. You might laugh or condone his behaviour, but what he's put in for charity is absolutely immense. And there's a lot of footballers today that don't get the recognition. Maybe they don't want it, but they put a lot towards what's going on now, I feel, and just mentioned that they go around giving the food parcels out and one thing and another. And the foundation, I'm totally aware of, and basically I'll support any time requested or invited. And by the way, if you can just send me a little email as to when you're playing your matches, and I'll come along and sit there with you and enjoy the game with the old lads.
I'll get Glenn Cockrell, who runs the group chat, to add your number. We'll sort out the numbers after this, and I'll get it to add to the group. It'll be brilliant for you to get in there and chat to a few of the lads.
Yeah, I enjoy seeing the lads, and as soon as you get to meet them, you're straight into each other anyway, and the conversation's great. But no, the foundation is doing a magic job, so keep the good work up, basically.
Well, Glenn Cockrell, you mentioned a name there. What a wonderful midfield player, and of course, Sheffield United fans of a certain age will remember him. Terrific player.
Yeah, he's captain, and so he's captain and manager of the ex-Saints group, and he keeps everyone going. I think with times like this as well, he's always checking on everyone on the group and making sure everyone's well. And fantastic player as well. Sorry, Peter.
Come to Peter in the mid-70s in a moment, but Brian, I was talking about reputations and the reputation of footballers, and how it can be misplaced and how more good is done than players are given credit for. Could that possibly be true of agents as well? Because you're probably on a par with my profession of journalists in terms of how the public rate us.
Yeah, it's a difficult industry, and it's like most industries. There's people who are in it for certain reasons. One of the reasons I wanted to get into it was coming from the player's perspective, that I wanted to make sure that the player was looked after correctly rather than just seen as a cash cow. So, I'll always make sure that what's right for the player is what happens. And effectively, you'll run a business off the back of it from having a good reputation. So I'm hopefully, one of those that is bringing a bit of light to what you call the dark side. Yeah,
the dark side. You're with Momentum Sports Management with Phil Corkling. I think you're partners in that. Peter, what's your view of the proliferation of agents in the game now? And every player at almost every level seems to have one. And how that's different from, or I'm taking it to be different from your day and your era.
I'll basically go with the agent, because I wished all those years ago I'd had an agent who could have looked after me. Not that I didn't do good deals or whatever when I changed clubs, but to have somebody backing you, supporting you, I would have enjoyed that part of life, having an agent, which unfortunately they weren't around in those days. So it would be nice to have.
Just knocking back to you, Brian, on this point. I mean, you've had plenty of experience of what an agent does, because in your career, I was astonished to see that you've played or been with 15 clubs at home and abroad, including non-league. 15. The longest spell was at Barnsley, 2005 to 2009. So you've had experience of moving around, how moves can be facilitated, and I suppose you've had to stand up for your rights as well during all of that.
Yeah, it was always something I was interested in. I always wanted to be, obviously I wanted my agent to go and, like you said, have the backing of me, like Peter said, but I always wanted to be involved. I never just went, oh, go and do this and get me whatever. I wanted to be part of the process and learn, which obviously I'm taking into now. And, probably wasn't until later in my career that I had all those clubs. And it came from getting a bit older, picking up injuries, short-term contracts and things, a bit of bad luck to go along with it. And you kind of get that journeyman tag, which I never liked because that wasn't me as a character. So if you look through it before that, I didn't have many clubs, and all of a sudden, as I got into nearer 30, that's when you kind of had the short-term deals. But again, you learn from all those experiences.
Well, we'll talk about some of those experiences, particularly those at Barnsley and Sheffield United. As the show goes on, you had some success with both those teams, some very memorable times. Peter, your career has been a great one. 40 caps for Wales, the Southampton FA Cup triumph, playing at the top level. Cardiff City, where you were born, you played for Leicester. Came to Sheffield Wednesday in 1970. Were there for 5 years. How do you reflect on that period personally? And do you now look back and think it was a case of misadventure for you with the way the team, tumbled down into the third tier?
Well, I was at Leicester City doing okay, but there was a clash of personalities between myself and Frank O'Farrell. I handed in a transfer request to leave the club, and basically Danny Williams came in for me, and I can recall driving up from Leicester to Sheffield, not really knowing the area, and I could see this haze across the horizon. It transpired we were heading towards Tinsley, and in those days it was very industrial and very much the haze. So, not that Danny saw my jaw drop, but he diverted over the top and round the back streets and got me to the Wednesday ground without seeing any more of it. Beyond that, I enjoyed, believe it or not, even though they were bad times, they were disappointing times, I really enjoyed my stay at Sheffield. It was a great club, great ground, facilities at the time. I was with a good bunch of lads, which I still admire today and speak to Brian Joycey, for example, still. It was a great time. Lived in Fulwood, close to Derbyshire, and everything was good about it. I enjoyed it. And I used to look around sometimes and think, 9,000-10,000 people, I would love to be successful here, because I think the people in Sheffield were looking forward to Sheffield Wednesday's success and they were desperate to get back. And I would love to be in that stadium where it was full, and the only time that happened was in the semi-final of the Cup when we played West Brom. Leicester played West Brom in the semi-finals, and I got pictures of it now with the Bob Bank there in the background, absolutely chock-a-block. So for me, I enjoyed my time at Sheffield big time, really did.
Yeah, I love the story about Danny Williams guiding you away from all the industrial areas to sort of sway you into joining. I mean, this was mid-70s, was round about the start of my career. And I'm as baffled now as I was then about how a team with so many quality players could struggle as much as they did. Not just yourself. There was Colin Harvey, there was Tommy Craig, there was John Holsgrove. You could go on. Brian Joyce, you mentioned one. Mick Prendergast would be another. Jimmy Mullen. How on earth did a team with those, quality individuals struggle as much as you did?
I'm not. Yes, like you say, exactly. Good players, quality players, been at other clubs, but basically, I'm not knocking the coaching staff or the management in any way, really, but a little story about Danny Williams. We maybe lose 3 or 4-0, and he'd come in and say, in front of the directors and say, God, that was great today. We'd all look up and think, what? And the next thing he would say, well, we got 2 corners on the trot. That's brilliant. For us, that was like, the joke about it. One of the good times was when Derek Dooley and Ron Staniforth were there. Absolutely a good combination, but unfortunately, at that level, you need a bit of a tough guy at the top, or the coach, or roles reversal the other way. The coach being a hard man and then the manager being soft. But they were both lovely, gentle sort of people, and you could go and hold your grudge against whomever, whatever with them, but it was just an even sort of kill. We needed a bit of fire in our belly, and not blaming them at all, but it was up to the players to do it. And it seemed to go on like that for a couple of years, which was sad. I found it really sad.
Yeah, Derek Dooley, a revered man who I got to know, and what a lovely man. And I also liked as a person Steve Burtonshaw, who came in and who, looking back, bears quite a lot of responsibility for the fact that the potential of these players individually was not realised. Is that a fair comment or not, from what you said?
Yeah. I think I was injured at the time when he was more or less there, and they were out training, doing his methods and what he wanted. And a physio would come in and say, "Oh, you should be all right with him." And I'm thinking, well, what do you mean? He said, "Well, how the way you play." I said, "Oh, okay. Well, we'll see it. We'll see when we get on the training ground and what have you." And it was a simple exercise, up, back, and through. And the ball went up, the ball came back, at which point, just say it came back to me, and I could use a dinky ball, as they say, a little bendy ball. Eric Potts would run down the line and then twist and go, without being offside, into position. And that worked a treat for a long time. So Burtonshaw liked me in that sense because I could knock a dinky ball in, as they say. But no, he was a good coach, and he was working at it, but unfortunately didn't quite get there.
No. Maybe too much football was attempted. I don't know, particularly with the quality midfield he had. Brian, talking of midfield and scoring goals from midfield, which you did quite often, 46, I think, in total in your career across 400 odd appearances. The times you had at Barnsley, do you look back on that as a particular highlight? I think that was 2005 to 2009.
Yeah, probably my best times. Probably played my best football most consistently over a longer period of time. And we had success, which obviously always helps as a team. And similar to what Peter said, there was a great bunch of lads, that team. It was a real young team. The average age was about 22, 23. So you done everything on and off the pitch together, and you run through a brick wall from each other, as well as having some quality players as well. So yeah, real fond memories every time I look back at those times. Yeah,
particularly the 93rd minute winner in the FA Cup against Liverpool at Anfield. That's got to be a highlight for any player.
Yeah. I had a discussion with someone there probably a week or so ago, and Anfield's one of those grounds you grow up, especially in my era, when I grew up, Liverpool was the biggest teams, and Anfield's one of the grounds you dream of playing at. So to go there and say you'll score a winner in the Kop end as well in the 93rd minute, it really is, boy, your dreams come true.
Yeah, we were talking just now to Peter about unfulfilled potential. Do you feel that about what subsequently happened to you and your move to Sheffield United, which again was a team with a lot of quality?
Yeah, there was that summer. There was a lot of interest, a lot of talk about where I was going to go. It kind of got dragged out. There was disagreements of what the price should be for me to go with a year left on my contract. Again, and the agents had difficulties dealing with the clubs. So I ended up going on loan with a view to permanent at Sheffield United. And talk about unfilled potential. That squad was probably the best squad I was ever involved in. I walked into that dressing room. You had James Beattie, Gary Speed, Ugo Ekio, Sunji Hai. It was ridiculous. Lee Hendry. You got full internationals in this team, and you're in the top of the championship. It was an incredible squad. But probably we had too many good players that you never knew which was the best side to put out, because you could have put 2 11s out every week.
Yeah, Kevin Blackwell was the manager, and of course you went all the way to the playoff final. I don't know if in retrospect you feel that you should have earned automatic promotion, but certainly in the playoff final against Burnley, it's as if the team didn't turn up.
Yeah, we felt we should have got automatic that year. And we're going away to Reading with a couple of games to go. We were in the mix as well and winning 1-0. That put us second in the table. And then the last 2 games of the season, we just needed to win one of them, and we drew both 0-0 and couldn't score. That disappointed. Then going into the playoffs, we beat Preston in the playoff semis and played particularly well. And then got down to Wembley, and I think Burnley, that team, we played them 3 times that year, obviously twice in the league and in the playoff final, and lost 1-0 to them all 3 games. So they just had the edge on us that year.
It was around that time that you saw the emergence of the 2 Kyles, Kyle Walker and Kyle Norton, and what terrific careers they've had, particularly Kyle Walker.
Yeah, both incredible, and you saw it at the time, both of them, and you knew that they were going to be fantastic players, and the experienced lads were great for them as well. I remember they were eating crisps and chocolate on the bus, and Gary Speed to them said, "You two are the future of England fullbacks here. Stop eating that and start looking after yourselves." And to be fair, they both listened, and they've gone on and had incredible careers, both of them.
Yeah, Peter, what do you make of football now? Do you still keep in touch with it? Do you still watch?
No, I don't. I don't know. I don't like saying it, and it's just a cliche. It's not as good as it was when I used to play, and I don't mean in that it's any worse, better, or whatever. I don't. I know they keep possession of the ball, and they have 80% of the game. And I'm thinking, if they attacked a little more and had a crack at some of the opposition, then I think results could be a little bit different. But they seem to hold on to the ball, and possession is 9/10 of the law. So in that sense, it's the way to play. But Southampton, unfortunately, they don't remember the history of the football club, and it disappoints me immensely, because not necessarily the cup final team or anything like that, but they moved on, they got a new ground, and Rupert Lowe was the director at the time, and he just didn't have an interest in the history of the club. So therefore you drift away from it inadvertently. That's why I said to Brian, keep in touch, get somebody to call. I'll come up and see you guys. Love to be in touch again, and all the rest of it. But the club, and don't get me wrong, the doors are always open when I go there, and it's a hi, Pete, how you doing? And it's all been very friendly. But I just sense deep down they don't enthuse about the ex-players as much as other clubs do, and they should do. It's picking up a little, but not to where I think it should be.
I think there's probably a disconnection across the board, certainly at some clubs, where ownership has changed so much, and particularly foreign owners coming in, that you've lost that historic thread. But we won't lose our thread. That's the end of part 1, but there's plenty more to come in part 2 with Brian Howard and with Peter Rodrigues. And Peter, we're going to take you a little bit further down memory lane after this short break.